In this video, I want to look at free response questions for the AP Psychology exam. I'm going to pick a few of them from past years and just generally go over how to approach these questions and satisfy all the components that the graders are looking for. Each FRQ covers different subject areas, so the marking rubrics are not completely identical. However, for pretty much all FRQ responses, these 6 general considerations will determine whether your answer is good or bad. And as you can probably see, coherency and non-contradiction are pretty important, and your responses have to stay on topic. You get 15 minutes for 2 questions, and each question has 2 to 3 parts usually, so you get roughly 10 minutes or less for each part. Here is a question from the 2022 exam. For Part A's first bullet point, vestibular sense, you earn 1 point max, and as you can see from the rubric to the bottom left, there are certain keywords that have to appear in your response, and in this case it's balance or dizziness, and if you fail to mention one of the two, you might not get the point. For Part B, divergent thinking, there are also keywords that must appear, but they are obviously different ones from the previous questions. In this case, it says that the response must indicate possible approaches to the campaign or refer to divergent thinking as thinking outside the box, innovation, or creativity. And it would be unacceptable if you do not indicate that racist ideas are creative, innovative, or outside of the box, or do not explicitly state that he's thought of different or multiple approaches. This is because these keywords are interconnected with the term that they want you to explain. You might have noticed from the examples on the rubric that your answers can literally be just 1 sentence long, and it does not have to be any more than that. For AP Psychology, the graders are not looking for essays or even paragraphs. 1 sentence for each bullet point is usually more than enough, as long as you can show them that you have grasped the idea they're testing by using the correct terms. Question 2 on this exam is on all exams generally different. Whereas the first question covers certain terms and vocabulary understanding, the second one is often about hypotheses and experiments. For example, in this question, they're showing you a graph of Dr. Germanotta's study, and you have to answer questions about that. So, for Part A, the first bullet point, you cannot simply say that Dr. Germanotta was wrong, because you also have to explain the reason, as you can see from the rubric. In this case, she was wrong because the graph shows a strong positive correlation instead of the negative one that she predicted. As for what statistical measure she would use, the answer is a correlation coefficient R. While the AP Psychology course doesn't have too much on this topic, you will still come across it at some point, so remember to study these points even if they seem minor. This question seems a bit longer than the rest and has more bullet points as well. So let's go over it step by step. Before you begin, it might be good to first identify what type of study this is, or at least determine what it is not. For example, you can clearly see that this study is not a survey. It's a bit more difficult to tell if it's an experiment, though. Mr. Gomez's study is missing random assignment, meaning he did not randomly assign the students to one of the 2 groups, so therefore it's also not an experiment, and that's just something that's good to know. The first bullet point asks you to identify the dependent variable. So, does which group the student is in depend on their quiz grade, or does their quiz grade depend on which group they're in? Mr. Gomez's conclusion is that the problem-solving tips given to Group 1 led to higher grades on the quiz. Therefore, the grades students got on the quiz depends on what group they were in, and the quiz grade is therefore the dependent variable. In your answer, you must specifically state that the dependent variable is the score the students earn on the quiz. Simply defining what the variable is, for example, saying it is the one being measured, will not get you the point because you did not put it into the context of the question. The second point asks how you can make the study into an experiment. I've already figured out that the study is missing random assignment, so using random assignment to put students into groups would make it an experiment. The third point asks the mode of each group. In mean, median, and mode is the number that appears the most, and as you can easily see here, Group 1's most common grade is 3 and Group 2's is 4. The next question is basically asking what needs to be known in order to calculate standard deviation, mean, median, or mode. And if you have learned about standard deviation, you know that it's how dispersed the data is in relation to the mean. So the measure of central tendency used here has to be the mean, because you can't figure out the standard deviation with median or mode alone. And after learning the lesson on ethics in one of the units, I think it would be pretty apparent that the ethical flaw here is lack of confidentiality or anonymity. Mr. Gomez publicized each student's marks without their permission and also revealed who got which grade, and that violates confidentiality, which is an important part of ethics in psychology. The next point asking about the application of metacognition might be a little tricky upon first glance. Metacognition isn't one specific term or strategy. It's actually an umbrella term that encompasses many different cognitive strategies. These cognitive behaviors involve students' awareness of their own knowledge and understanding, as well as their own monitoring of their progress to improve their scores. So for this one, you can say something like, students can keep track of their own learning so they can study better for future tests. However, you will not get the point for this if you mention anything about doing better, working harder, or listening in class with more attention. The keywords for this question all have to do with thinking, and thinking about one's own way of thinking. So in order to get the point, you have to mention that. Physical action and hard work are less about self-comprehension, so they do not get the point. For the last part, levels of processing can range from shallow thinking to deep thinking. Mr. Gomez's study could support theories of levels of processing by showing that students who use the studying tips use deep processing and learn better in class. So you either respond by describing how the tips helped students deep processing and increase scores, or how the lack of tips led to shallow processing and worse scores. However, it would be unacceptable to simply say that students who process things on multiple levels learn better, or students who use long-term memory do better, because that does not include the fact that Mr. Gomez's problem-solving tips helped them. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful to you, and you've gotten a better idea of what to include in your free response answers. It's mainly about the key terms that they're looking for, and combined with these general considerations, your answer has to have a more holistic view, even if it's just one sentence. It has to have the important words that they're looking for, and also coherency.